and this is what I say to people, right? You could be the best builder, tiler, whatever. You could be winning awards left, right, and centre for the quality of your work, quote unquote, right? And you could still fail in business because you're not going to be rewarded, especially in 2019, for being the best craftsman. There's plenty of starving artists around, right?
Yeah.
You've got to be good at all of it.
Thanks, Rossi. Righto, welcome to Trademutt's 120 Grit, a podcast for the working class. Episode 13, we've got a legend in the studio today, putting Ed and I both to shame because he's a level 1 CrossFit trainer. He's bulging out of his shirt over there.
He's tight.
He's also the founder of Tradies in Business and is quite a well-renowned podcaster himself. Welcome, Warrick Bidwell.
Thanks, mate. That was very formal, actually.
Yeah, it was a bit too formal, wasn't it?
It's the working class talking podcast, to my mother. Mate. Is what everybody calls me, mate.
Yeah. Actually, we were the first people. Your podcast was the first podcast we were ever on.
Well, you can thank my wife for that.
Really?
Yeah, she saw you guys online somewhere, I think, Instagram or something. I think you were fully clothed at the time. And she said, oh, you should check out these Trademutt guys. They're doing some stuff with like mental health and that. And we'll obviously talk about it today, but it's something that I'm very passionate about and have a personal experience with. And at the time, I was toying with the direction of my podcast, and I thought, I want to do more stuff like you guys are doing with 120 Grit. So, yeah, it was Amy's fault that I'm now sitting here with you blokes.
That's great. Bloody perfect.
Yeah, well, bugger, but we met on the podcast. That was not in person. Obviously, it was over the airwaves, and then had a little encounter in the car park at Dan Murphy's up in Toowoomba.
We did.
We were sort of there loading some ice in the back of the car and wearing our Trademutt shirts, and a familiar voice said, "Oi,
yeah,
I know you blokes."
I was trying to hide, but again, got to blame the wife. She's like, "Hey, there's the Trademutt blokes. You should go talk to him." Push me in the back.
Get over there. Yeah. Well, mate, thanks for coming in.
No, pleasure.
Bloody excited to have a chat to you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things we'll cover today, which we're pretty excited about.
Yeah. Do you want to, should we start with a little brief of Tradies in Business and sort of what that is and how you got into that, and then we'll dive into some other stuff?
Sure, mate, sure. Look, I guess Tradies in Business came out of the idea from nearly 12 years now of business coaching, and that morphed into just working with tradies. And I realised that basically I can't impact as many people as I want to just by doing it one-on-one. So I had to do something that was going to reach more trade business owners and actually make more of an impact on families in Australia, and obviously the mental health piece as well. And so I had a bit of a chop at this a few years ago with someone else. It was called something different. Didn't really take off, just differing views within the partnership. I'm sure you blokes have never had an argument about the direction of the business
We
before.
haven't had one today, funnily enough.
It's been at least 24 hours.
It's only 11:30.
But yeah, Tradies in Business was, even the name itself was like, I was trying to come up with something cool, like something marketing-y and fancy. And then it was like, why don't I just friggin' call it what it is? It's about tradies in business, because that...
Simples.
Yeah, exactly. Keep it simple.
No guesswork.
No. So this is really, we've been up and running for 12 months now, and we're starting to get a bit of traction, but basically just wanting to get some knowledge and awareness out to as many trade business owners as I possibly can, so they don't end up like my old man.
Yeah.
And that's really what Tradies in Business is all about. It's getting tradies to be as good at the business piece as they are at their trade. That's the tagline essentially.
Yeah, right.
That's
so you mentioned your old man. So what's the story there?
Yeah, Dad was a builder. He's certainly not anymore. And we were chatting before you hit.
Is that because he was so successful and he's retired?
Yeah, he's retired. He's got his 53-foot Riviera, and yeah, no, that's a crock of shit. To be honest, Dad's stuffed. I saw him for Father's Day recently, and it's really hard to see the guy that used to have guns bigger than mine, always be flexing. But, Dad was strong. He was only a short bloke. He was 5'4", but he always had these big arms, I remember these big, strong arms and his chest, and he was just this nuggety little bastard that, he was trying to cut the mustard with bigger blokes on building sites, and so he was a builder all his life and used to be a shed foreman, putting up the big industrial sheds and all that sort of stuff. Bit of a jack of all trades, he did his own plumbing and electrical back in the 60s and 70s when you still could do that sort of stuff. But at 77 now, I saw him on Father's Day, and he can't walk from one end of the house to the other without needing to stop for a rest. He's on an oxygen machine. He's got, heart issues going on. No one knows what it is, but it's probably from sucking in spray paint and silica dust and all that for years. And he hasn't got 2 dimes to rub together. Him and Mum own their little renovated house on the Downs, the Darling Downs. They've got a shitty old Commodore, and I just sold their caravan for them because they needed the cash. No super, no life insurance, nothing, no savings, and that's it. They're just surviving on an age pension. So it's such a shit thing to see when I know he busted his ass his whole life in a quote-unquote business, but never actually created a legacy. He's not going to leave anything behind for me and my brother. It's just all going to go with him. Yep. So, that's a big motivation for me with doing what I do with tradies in business and the work that I do with trade business owners is they're all sitting on this amazing opportunity. It's like I see these guys and women in the trades now as well, The trades used to be like a second-rate option when I was at school. I wanted to go on the tools with my dad. I wanted to be a builder. I used to labour for him as a young bloke, apart from getting yelled at a whole lot. What are you doing that for? I bloody told you about that. But I wanted to go on the tools and be a builder. My grandfather was a builder. His grandfather was a builder. My uncles were all trades. My grandfather on the other side was a motor mechanic, which was my second choice. Hated school. I got, they call it bullying now, but I got picked on a lot because I was a little fella. Didn't have the guns. I wasn't packing heat back then. But yeah, I hated school. Like I had no mates. I got picked on a hell of a lot. I didn't like being there. I suffered a lot of, I guess, probably anxiety and depression as a young bloke, although it was all undiagnosed back then. I was just the little guy that got picked on a lot, and I didn't like going to school.
Yeah.
So I wanted to leave school at 15 and get a trade because that was what I actually enjoyed doing, and I was good at it. I was pulling lawnmowers apart when I was 12 years old, and Dad would give me old mowers to fix, and that was where I was happy. Bookwork and stuff just gave me the shits, but I was really good at it because I spent all my time hiding from the big buggers at school and in the library, because they didn't hang out there. So, yeah, I ended up going to university and studying business and not doing a trade, which I wouldn't say I resent my parents' decision for that because I try not to resent too many things in life or too many people. But I definitely, I wistfully wonder if I'd gone into a trade, would I have actually built a business, a building company and had employees and left a legacy and, had that dream that I guess so many people have when they go into their trade business. And I guess I've just come at it from a different direction. So I get to hang out with plumbers and electricians and builders and stuff now.
And have to get your hands dirty, mate.
And I don't have to do the hard work. Yeah, I can just sit in a cushy office like you blokes, air conditioned, hot women bringing you drinks. Like, it's a piece of cake. Soft hand scenario,
just
man.
like the Mutt Hut.
Just like the Mutt Hut. Except it's Dan bringing me drinks.
Yeah, but
in the short shorts. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you come from a long line of builders.
Yeah.
So it's in your blood.
Oh, absolutely.
But your old man didn't want you to get a trade.
No. He was dead against it, hey.
So, is that because he wasn't doing it properly himself and couldn't see
absolutely
opportunity?
Yep. So do you want to tell my story, mate?
No, sorry.
No. I think it's a secret to success for guests is take the piss out of the host of a podcast.
Oh, you've done it now.
Yes.
You've done it now.
I agree.
That's how mine's done.
I'm glad Ed was on the end of it, not me.
No, like Dad's dad, so my grandfather, he actually built a lot of buildings in PNG, Papua New Guinea, around the wartime. And so I've got these memories of seeing black and white photos of my grandfather, building like old school timber construction up in PNG back in the 40s.
No nail guns?
They weren't called nail guns back then. They were nails on the end of guns, like, maybe that's why I've got the guns.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, by the way, I'm a dad, so I got plenty of dad jokes.
Yeah, no dramas. You'll fit in well around here. Yeah.
But no, when it came time to sort of talk about, well, what are you going to do when you leave school? I was like, well, I want to be a builder or a mechanic. And it's like, no, you're not. You're going to university. I'm like, I don't want to go to university. This conversation wasn't quite that succinct, but that was the essence of it. Like Dad's whole experience with the trades was working his tail off and never having any money. You know, he expressed to me a couple of years ago, tears in the eyes. He basically almost broke down. He said, you know, he just has always felt bad that he didn't provide for my brother, myself, and my mother the way that he always wanted to. And like you can just see that he's gutted about it, and he can't do anything about it now. You know, he's 77 years old, and that's it. Those cards have been played. And so his idea was that if I went into the trades, I'd be broke and physically stuffed for the rest of my life, because that was his experience with it. And that was the experience of a lot of tradespeople, quote unquote, back then, because the ticketing system, you know, it was a second-rate option. If you were no good at school, you did a trade, because at least you could go and work your ass off and make some money. And that's how he got into the trades in the first place. You know, he came from a pretty rough childhood, broken home, alcoholic father, 7 brothers and sisters. You know, he was beaten and abused as a young bloke and kicked out of home when he was 15. And so what did he do? Went and worked with his hands because he was no good at schoolwork. Whereas I was the opposite. I was good at school. So he went, here's the opportunity for my son. Here's his ticket out.
Yeah.
You know, but by the time I went to university, trades were starting to actually it's a profession.
Oh, yeah.
You know, professional plumbers, professional sparkies, professional builders. I mean, it is they're
an integral part of the whole system.
And we're stuffed without them.
Yeah.
And you can't hide behind, now with marketing, everything's on social media. You can't hide behind, you know, it's all, you're out there, your reputation's everything, and you need to be proud of your work, because there's competition in business and there's plenty of competition in the trades, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And I was chatting to someone the other day, doing a trade is now a first option. It's like it's the more sensible, more attractive option for a lot of people coming through school. And this guy actually said, "Oh, you know, if I don't get into a trade, I'll probably do a university as a fallback." And I was like, and here I was thinking university back in the early 90s was my ticket to freedom. I was going to get the cushy job and the big salary, and the reality was very, very different to that.
I couldn't agree with that more, and I think if I had my time again, I would do everything exactly the same. Getting a trade straight out of school was the best thing I ever did, because not only was I learning a powerful, you know, good skill at that time that will always be useful, but I learnt more about myself than you know I ever could have otherwise, because that life experience, going to work, getting up that same time every day and turning up, working hard, it just instills a work ethic in you that is priceless. And you can always go back. You can fall back on a uni degree, right?
Yeah.
It's just
You could go get an arts degree.
Yeah, you can't get an apprenticeship, you know, when your body starts to fail, but you can always get a degree when when things sort of break down, I guess. So.
Yeah, totally. And it's hard. Like I've actually toyed with the idea over the last sort of 5 years. I've had a few personal changes going in my life, and I thought, you know what, maybe this is the time for me to go and do an apprenticeship. You know, I've lost everything. It doesn't matter if I go back to making 30, 40 grand a year or something like that. Maybe now's the time for me to go and do an adult apprenticeship. And one of the things that stopped me from doing that was actually thinking about the number of people that I wouldn't impact doing what I do now.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, even sitting on this podcast today, just hopefully sharing a story that will touch someone, but more than one person. You know, it might touch 2 or 3 people. And to me, that's what I am driven by in business, quote unquote.
Yeah, most definitely.
That's awesome.
So where'd you go to uni?
So I born in Canberra, 6 years old. Mum and Dad packed up and moved to Queensland because Dad's back was already starting to give him grief and his joints. And you know, back then they said, "Oh, it's the cold weather. You need to move to a warmer climate." So moved to this little tiny backwater called the Sunshine Coast in Queensland back in 1979, and promptly set up shop on the 2.5 acres that they'd bought basically over the phone, because there was no internet obviously back then. You couldn't just Google the block and have a look at you know, the street view.
Wow.
So, you know, packed me and my brother up, moved to Queensland, set up a caravan, and Dad promptly went about getting work. Was doing labouring work for some local guys while building our house. 2.5 years we lived in a caravan. The bathroom was a garden shed, and I remember boiling the old Vicola urn, like it was the big like 20 litre stainless steel urn that you see at the bowls club where they get the hot water out of for cups of tea. That was what we did to heat the water up for the bath for 2.5 years, going to school locally. So, yeah, grew up on the sunny coast. Did uni in Brisbane here, good old Bris Vegas. Studied business, majored in accounting. Boring as bad shit, eh? And came out of that and promptly went and got a job with a building supplies company because I wanted to be in the industry, right? So went and worked for Monia Roof Tiles at that stage. They got bought out by PGH and then CSR. So I did a couple of years with that company and then hated accounting. And I was sick of Brisbane, back to the coast, chasing a bit of skirt, and took a job as a sales rep to the building industry. So my mum literally cried when I rang her to say, I've got this really good job, I'm going to be working as a sales rep, repping to the building industry, thinking, mum would be like, oh, great, you're in the industry again, She's like, oh my gosh, you're walking away from your career as an accountant. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. I freaking hate it.
Yeah.
How funny.
Yeah. So did that for nearly 6 years actually. All around Queensland, talking to builders and developers and putting white goods into houses and stuff for them. So that was kind of cool. And then fell into financial planning, back to the books, more study. Took over a firm. So I was in financial planning for about 7 or 8 years, working with a lot of small business owners, mums and dads, helping them with their debts and all that sort of stuff. And it was 2007, so just before the GFC. I was sick of the planning. I was working my butt off in a business where I was doing most of the work and getting paid the least amount of money, right? And I got a business coach in to help us out, myself and my business partner, and saw what he was doing. Was like, oh shit, this is how I'm going to actually help people, right? Is like I've got all these families that are trying to pay off their mortgage and do all this stuff, and they just got no cash. And a lot of them were tradies back then. Sunny Coast was a lot of tradespeople. And it's like, why don't you just draw more out of your business, mate? And it's like, Warrick, I can't just pay myself more. There's no money in the bank. I'm like, what's wrong with you, man? So, yeah, the solution to me was like, that's it. I'm going to sell out. I'm going to be a business coach. And that was nearly 12 years ago now.
Yeah, wow.
And most of my clients have been tradespeople because that's what I do, right? My weekends are doing what tradies do. And, they were most of my mates, like most of my clients were tradies. So, yeah, that was when I decided, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to work with tradies. It's my heritage. It's like you said, Dan, it's in my blood, mate.
In your blood.
If I can't swing a hammer or twirl a screwdriver, then at least I'm going to hang out with people that do.
Yeah.
And if it all goes to shit, you can always start a second-hand lawnmower business by the sounds of it.
I'll just fix old lawnmowers. Well, funnily enough, my grandfather did that because he was a motor mechanic in Sydney for half of his life and retired to put Macquarie down in New South Wales there. And I remember him actually for cash because he was a bit of a unit. Like he didn't mind... what should we say, just helping some goods change hands for cash here and there that may not have been his. But basically he used to race powerboats and stuff back in the 50s and 60s, and they'd dead set go and knock off engines out of cars parked in the street to put in their race boats. He was a bit of a unit. But I remember him fixing lawnmowers for cash. He was on the pension and he'd do this secretly on the side so that no one found out, and he had all these lawnmowers in the backyard, and that was how he paid for the fuel for the boat. And oh man.
Oh, no thanks.
Yeah, good.
So you live on the Sunshine Coast and you were married at the time?
Yeah, I got married at 29-ish, I think, the second time. We won't talk about that. First one didn't last very long. But that was, like, my first one was sort of where my personal experience with mental health and suicide sort of started, was as a young bloke at 24. But yeah, remarried at about 29 years of age, something like that. And lived happily on the sunny coast there for a whole bunch of years up in the Noosa area, and got myself the big acreage property and all that sort of stuff. So life was pretty good, loving the coaching thing, making good money, working with a lot of people, a lot of tradespeople. And then, things took a bit of a left-hand turn a few years ago for me. So been a bit of a reinvention of myself personally.
Yeah, right. So you're up there obviously doing business coaching, but as we know, any type of coaching, whether it's for business or otherwise, it's far more than just about your business or your sport or whatever. It's this, you're managing personalities, and life has a whole lot of different sort of components that all come together and impact your business and all that sort of stuff. So you're sort of seeing a lot of colourful, different types of people coming through, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. And, people think business coaching is about business. And there's a lot of people out there who are great at just business, right? And they're really important skills. You guys would know, running your show, how important it is to know what's going on with the money and the marketing and the people that you got around you and your partnerships and what's your strategic vision and all that sort of really exciting stuff and all the wank words that go along with it. But that's not enough. You could be brilliant at all the business stuff and actually still not make it. And honestly, not achieve happiness in life.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that I've come to realise the hard way is that amassing nice cars and acreage properties and accolades, expensive watches, all that sort of stuff, they're nice things, but that's not, for me personally, what success is all about. And it wasn't only about that. I was all about family time and health and all that sort of stuff. But I think a lot of us talk a lot of talk without really getting it. It hasn't sunk in for a lot of people yet.
Yeah.
And that's what I really want to try and bring to the table with Tradies in Business and the work that I do one-on-one as well is helping people to get it without having to set fire to everything in their life. Because I lost all that stuff. I lost the acreage property. I lost the fancy cars. I lost the marriage, access to my kid and everything, as we've talked about off air. And once I did that, once I lost everything, it was like, yeah, that stuff, some of it was really important to me, but most of it was not. It had become important, but it was more about me and who I was, who I was as a man, as a then ex-husband, a father, a member of my community. And those things actually are more pivotal, in my opinion, to business success than having the best marketing strategy, the best set of budgets and forecasts, all important things, but without the people that are driving it actually being in touch with their values, their beliefs, their identity, what's truly important to them and who they are being as a person. I think the rest of it is just short term.
Yeah. Let's talk about that journey when your marriage broke down and you had a child. How old was she?
So my daughter would have been 4 when it first fell apart. I mean, it had been happening for years, 17-year relationship. Things happen gradually, as we know. But yeah, she was 4 years old. Just turned 4 after we split. After my ex and I split. So yeah, that's been one of the hardest things for me. Is like that's a big cost, and the cost is not mine to be paid. The cost is actually being paid by my daughter, and that busts me every day. It's Father's Day recently. She FaceTimed me for Father's Day because she lives in another state of Australia, and I probably only see her 3-4 times a year in person, max. It's been sort of 2 to 3 times a year for the last couple of years, and yeah, she's paying the price every day for my mistakes, and that's a really shit thing to stomach as a dad, especially of a daughter. Son, it's no less difficult, but I guess that dad-daughter thing is any dad out there with a daughter will tell you that it's a pretty hardcore thing, hardcore bond, and just that need to protect and lead my daughter, and I'm not there. She comes home after a boy's been picking on her, and I'm trying to coach her over FaceTime on how to deal with it, and it's
and all you want to do is hug her.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
How do you manage that?
Look, it was super hard at the start. A big part of it has actually been, so I've remarried since and, met the love of my life. So, silver lining in just about every cloud. My wife, my now wife, has been a huge part of my support. But a lot of it was actually taking ownership. And I had to step up and own my situation because the world around me wanted me to blame my ex-wife. They wanted me
easier to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Point the finger and, she did this. And it doesn't matter how it all came to a head. The fact was I made a choice. I could have stayed. I could have maybe changed it, become a different man, stayed in that relationship. But I made a choice to end it. And it became a mutual choice. But in owning all of that, I've actually freed myself from a lot of that negativity and the bitterness. And, I've gone through another round of that recently where like my ex and I chat a little bit. My wife and my ex-wife both chat online. So they sort of message each other about stuff here and there. And it's all come about because of me as a man and the role that I've chosen to actually step into. And up until that point, life was shit. You know, I was still bawling my eyes out 12 months ago. Every so often, I'd be sitting there eating breakfast and it'd just all bubble out and you know, thinking about the fact I haven't seen my daughter for 4 months and haven't picked her up, or, you know, I don't even know what the hell she does from one day to the next. And that was all me, right? That was just, and people are like, no, it wasn't all you, you know, she had a part to play in that as well. I'm like, yeah, that's all cool. Like, we all have a role to play, but my life has been my choice, and all of my choices have created my life. And I think when people do that, especially blokes, but anybody, when you actually do that, you get this real awesome sense of freedom from all the crap that everyone wants you to believe, that it's not your fault and it's the economy, or it's the, you know, it's the changes to the tax law, or it's your ex-partner, or it's the school system, or it's the speed limits on the roads, whatever the hell it is we want to blame or you know, basically deflect that responsibility to. But when you actually own all that shit, it's like, well, if it's mine, I can actually do something about it.
It's liberating, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard, and I don't get it right every day. You know, still got a bit of a leaky face the other day because, you know, Father's Day and not seeing my kid and all that sort of stuff.
Naturally.
But you know, by and large, it's like, well, you know what? And I said to you fellas, you know, I'm living the dream. You know, I've met the love of my life. I didn't actually know that a relationship could be that amazing. So married her, about to build a house, got a great business. You know, I'm hanging out with some cool people. Even you blokes, not too bad. You know, relationship with my family's sort of taken a turn for the better over the last couple of years with my brother, and you know, things are okay with the ex, and yeah, life's good. I'm fit, healthy. I got guns. You know, always wanted guns. I wish I had these guns when I was 13 at
they
school.
They barely fit through the door coming in here.
It's the cotton on kids.
I suppose a key takeaway from that part there is that, you know, from the outside looking in, it might look like everything's rosy and everything's, you know, this Warrick Bidwell bloke, mate, he's killing it.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
He's got this awesome business and big was.
Oh,
you know, he's
yeah.
got the house, he's got the wife, and but everyone goes through different shit in their lives.
You peek behind the front door at, you know, 7:49 on a Thursday night, and as I heard someone say years ago, you know, I still sit down to take a crap. I still got to put one leg in each leg of the jeans when I put them on in the mornings. You know, they don't just like walk across the room and fly onto my feet. It's like we're all normal in that regard, right? And we all fall over and skin our knees in life. And I guess I've just done it more than some people, and I also did it more catastrophically, I suppose. You know, like I literally lost everything. And I almost lost my life through it all as well. And it took that, unfortunately for me, because I'm a bit of a thick head. Like, my dad's a builder, come on.
And so was his dad and his dad and his dad.
And the other side of the family were motor mechanics. So, I mean, you know, really.
Thick as two short planks.
But you know, for me, it took losing everything to actually wake up and wake up to what I had done to create that life.
Such a reoccurring theme, that again, is like people that we've had in here and other people that have got stories, you know, to tell. It's when they hit what their rock bottom is, to actually go out and make a change.
And everyone's rock bottom is different, right? I used to compare my rock bottom to other blokes, and, you know, I'd listen to podcasts and I'd see personalities, and you guys have had some amazing guests. I've listened to some of your episodes as well, like, and I still listen to these other guys' stories and other people's stories, women as well, and I think, oh wow, I got nothing to complain about. Like, that's a really stupid thing to do to ourselves.
That's not what it's about.
No, because like, I might have had my Ranger repossessed, and that's it. That's my rock bottom. But for me personally, that could have been the catalyst for change.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be losing everything. It doesn't have to be an attempt on your life. And I think it's really dangerous for any of us to think that we can make our problems better by finding someone who's in a worse situation.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't actually change the fact that, for me, what I'm going through is shithouse.
Yeah.
And it's my rock bottom.
Yeah.
And I think that's another part of that ownership piece, is I've got to own the fact that this is rock bottom for me, and what everybody else is going through is irrelevant.
And it's also an important part for the other person to understand that what the other person's going through is okay. Like,
Yeah.
that would be, like, you can come out of that. If that's how you're feeling, well, that's fine. Let's start working on it. It doesn't have to be, we spoke about, like, the Greg Inglis thing. And we had a guest in here, and they're like, oh, Greg Inglis, like, what's he got to be worried about? You know what I mean? And he's just been going through all this depression, and he's been, hospitalised a couple of times. So, mate, well, what he's going through, you can't even relate to because it's a completely different life.
It's his, not yours.
You know what I mean? Exactly.
Yeah.
So
comparing yourself to anyone, everyone is possibly the biggest downfall in society at the moment, and obviously it's driven by social media and all that sort of stuff. But comparing yourself to anyone else is just the most detrimental thing to your own
it's so
existence.
Incredibly destructive.
Oh, big time.
it can have a positive, though. It's not all negative. Like, looking at other people are doing and being like, oh, that I could implement some of that. And I can do that.
Yeah.
There's definitely a difference between being inspired by someone else and doing that.
I think that's an important thing to
Yeah, for sure.
remember.
Yeah, it's what I in my experience at least, it's what happens after the comparison. I do it at the gym. I look at some of the guys. I've got a couple of mates who are just mad CrossFitters, and they're doing stuff that same age. I look at them and just think, how the friggin' hell are you doing that? Like, I've been training the same amount of years as you, and I automatically compare myself to them. And then I can choose whether to tear myself down and go, oh, well, clearly he's
better,
or be a victim. Yeah, well, they are better, but but maybe it's his genes, or maybe just his dad fed him better food or something. Like, that's crap. What would be better is to actually celebrate his achievement and say, mate, that's friggin' awesome. How did you do that? Because I want to get a bit more of that for me if I can.
Yeah.
Rather than start to, turn the spotlight on the self and, invalidate ourselves or tear the other person down to make us feel better. I think that's the other danger, and a bit of the Aussie way with the piss take all the time. There's a bit of that tear the other bloke down that's doing better, and
big time.
I think
it's
that's
an
a slippery slope.
easy road to take.
When things started to unravel, I guess, in your marriage, were there key indicators and key points, things that you just could have done differently looking back that just really contributed to the unraveling of it all?
Yeah, there's one word that's really stuck with me through all of it. So when my ex and I basically, I'll say, decided to separate, the events were pretty ordinary the way it came about, but it was the catalyst. And she said something to me through, the ensuing weeks are pretty wild. Like, I've got a beautiful house on 10 acres in the Noosa hinterland. I've got a daughter. I've got a business. I've got a public profile. I've got European cars in the driveway and all sorts of stuff going on. And like all of that, and I'm, I've heard plenty of people describe this, and I'm sure, a lot of your listeners could identify, but it's like just all crashes to the ground in an instant. The night I found out what had been going on and sort of, there'd been a bit of, I guess, infidelity in the marriage, and it was dead set like being hit in the guts by the 7 p.m. out of Roma Street. Like, it was just, it felt that physically crushing, because it was like everything that I'd worked my tail off for 15, 20 years just evaporated in that instant. So one of the things that my ex told me about, why it had come to that was that I'd become indifferent in the marriage. And that word just like stabbed me in the chest when she told me that. It was like, I didn't agree at the time, but I realised looking back now that I had actually become so focused on, making enough money and building a good enough business and providing the good things and the nice things and the holidays. Like, it had become about all of that idea of success, and being a coach, we're obviously quite motivated and positive as a general rule. And so you're surrounded by a lot of that sort of culture. And I'd got really caught up in all of that. And it wasn't until, I basically had a good long look at, well, what do I need to own? What can I take ownership for in this whole thing, this whole situation? It was like, she's right, I had become indifferent and just didn't realise that I had. And like, for her, that was like, well, she'd lost connection with me. So of course she, felt a bit lost and drifted off looking for significance and someone to pay attention to her. And that was actually my doing in a large sense. And I think men have a big role to play in all of this. And, this is not a marriage counselling podcast, thank goodness for that, because no one would pay for the advice. But But I think men have a lot to answer for in terms of where some of these things end up. You know, I think, yeah, there's, you know, equal opportunity and equal rights and all that sort of stuff, but men are leaders. We're meant to be leaders. We were born to be leaders. It's part of our DNA. It's wired into us. And to sit back and try and do this whole, you know, equal thing and halvesies thing, and I'll probably piss a bunch of people off in saying this, but, you know, I wasn't leading my family well enough. I wasn't being strong enough. I wasn't being decisive enough. And so, you know, my ex was carrying the can with some of that stuff, and I think it just wore her down.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that was probably the big thing, mate.
It's easy to make excuses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that's a reoccurring thing in, I know a lot of, you know, families that have been divorced or relationships that are broken down, and it's, yeah, a reoccurring thing that these are all the reasons why, but it was, you know, it wasn't anything to do with me.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with it, you know,
Yeah.
like that bitch or that.
So often
bastard,
so often the blinkers are on, and even just hearing what you were saying about your old man running his business 12 hours a day or whatever longer to keep providing for the family, keep the roof over his head, flogging himself senseless, thinking that he is doing the right thing.
That's right.
To you know, to be the best provider, the best leader that he can be. But he's missing the mark, and that to him was the most important thing. And then maybe by the sounds of it, you were, you know, in a similar vein, you know, with what you're so focused on the business side of things that, you know, for the same reasons, to provide, to keep the roof over the head, and to do everything that you think is the right thing to do to build a loving family, and it's not enough.
And it's a story we tell ourselves, and I see this probably. Look, I see it with anybody in life. A lot of business people tell themselves this story. It's this narrative that runs in their head, and it's sadly really prevalent with trades and trade business owners, is that unless I'm working hard, I'm not of value. I have to be working hard
but what is
to
working
be of
hard?
value. Exactly. But and I think where that got misapplied for me was working hard was about how much time generally I put into it. And I see so many
people
of
just
our
doing
clients,
shit for the sake of doing shit.
it's like, why are you spending hours on that? Like, you know, trying to work out the right hashtag for your Instagram feed. It's like, how is that even important when you've got a missus at home waiting to see you? It's like, oh, well, you know, I got to put the work in to get the results. Like, no, you don't. You've got to put the work in, but you don't have to put the time in that a lot of people put into their businesses.
Yeah.
And when you say yes to that, you're saying no to something else. And, you know, in me saying yes to a whole bunch of time in my business and going away for conferences and, you know, networking events at night and all that sort of stuff, I was saying no to connection with my ex.
That gives you an excuse, though.
Absolutely.
And that's why a
It's
lot of people do it. It's
justification,
just like, oh, well, no, I have to do this. So, oh, no, you
Totally.
don't.
And it's just a bullshit story we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, my dad thought that by working harder, he'd actually get more for us as a family. And the reality was, like, he probably would end up with the same amount of money anyway. And what we really wanted to hang out with our dad, you know.
You wanted him
I wanted him to teach me how to ride a motorbike, but
that never happened.
that never happened, right?
Well, let's chat about some of the reoccurring things that you see through your business. So, like, you work obviously with a lot of tradies, and majority of our audience is tradies. What is coming through the door? What's the main problem that, you know, early stage and like small business owners out there have? What are they coming to you with?
I think the early stage diagnosis, mate, is an addiction to working harder, as we've just talked about, and this idea that business has to be hard. Like, growing a business, being successful, it's hard. It's a challenge. You know, it takes a long time. You got to do, you know, if you do 40 hours a week, well, 60 is better, and that's going to get me there. That's one of the, I think, really dangerous approaches to business. But some of the most common things is just people working their guts out, you know, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. I had a young bloke a while back working over 70 hours a week. So he's on the tools full time, doing a 40, 50 hour week on the tools. And then either side of that, bracketing the day, is paperwork and bookings and, you know, trying to follow up quotes and doing quotes, you know, doing drawings, all sorts of stuff. And that's 5-6 days a week. And, you know, it's just this, I don't know. I don't want to be too critical of everybody, but, and look, I've learned this the hard way as well, but it's just the idea that more is better and more is not better. The other thing is just not learning more about business. You know, it's it's not actually that complicated, right? You guys have probably figured that out. Money in, money out. You got to do things that bring the money in, and then you got to limit the things that make the money go out.
Yeah.
Business itself is a simple formula, and we teach our members and our followers, some of the simple side of business. And I think it's actually been made really complicated by a lot of people, particularly in the trades. It's like, and this is what I say to people, right? You could be the best builder, tiler, whatever. You could be winning awards left, right, and centre for the quality of your work, quote unquote, right? And you could still fail in business because you're not going to be rewarded, especially in 2019, for being the best craftsman. There's plenty of starving artists around, right?
Yeah.
You've got to be good at all of it. And in actual fact, with trades being such a fantastic first option for so many people, there's a lot of talk in this country about the skills shortage, but I see a lot of skilled trades out there. It's probably easier to employ a tradesperson these days than it is to find someone to work in your office.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people doing trades that there's a fairly big pool of talent.
Do you think that tradies are harder to upskill in the business side of things? Because, obviously the journey to become a builder, you do your trade, you come through, and then you're all, whiz bang, I can do everything on the tools now, I'm signed off.
Yep.
Now I want to start my own business. But, when I did my mature age apprenticeship, there was no business coaching at all. You just get to the end and you're signed off and you're like, sweet, away you go. And I know a lot of people that we've worked with, again, really good chippies, but they didn't want to upskill in the actual business side, and it just destroys them in the long run because they're not profitable. How many people do you tell, oh, this is what I do, and Blake's like, don't need that, mate?
Too many, mate. Too many. I think too many trade business owners or tradies are, I don't know if they're scared to learn about it or if they've convinced themselves that they can't learn about it. The number of times I've heard over the years of, I'm just no good with numbers.
I'm just a dumb tradie, mate.
Exactly. I'm just a chippy. I'm just a tiler. I'm just a dumb mechanic. And it's
why is that?
I challenge them on that. It's like, where did you get that shit from? Yeah. What's just a dumb mechanic? Why is that? I don't know. Maybe it's a society thing. Maybe it's just the people that are attracted to the trades are still, maybe university wasn't the option for them. And while I talk about here, the beautiful unicorn farts and everything about trades being the first option, I think the reality is still, and you've only got to look at the media, right? At the tradie bashing, to use a wank word, but tradies are seen as this other part of business, this other part of society almost, and it's shithouse. I got really fired up the other day. I stopped at the servo to fill up with fuel, and I see the marketing, Tradie Tuesdays, and it's a picture of a friggin' sausage roll and a Coke, and it's all shit food. And I sat there. I took a photo of it, and I was going to jump on Instagram and have a big rant, as Woz tends to do, and I thought, this is bullshit. Like, tradies, just because you're a tradie doesn't mean you eat shit. Like, plenty of accountants eat shit. I did for years, and I was going to have this big rant, and then out of the survey comes two blokes in high vis with sausage rolls and and
you
ice breaks.
Bastards!
Yeah. It was like,
marketing.
Damn it, I can't do that now. But it's like there's this sort of undercurrent of tradies are, they drink more, they're more likely to get in fights, they eat shit. Like, it's just a really crappy.
But they fall into
persona.
that. They fall into that quite easily. That whole marketing side, like most people do.
Sure.
I think it is that reoccurring theme. But it's interesting, like, how are you breaking through to blokes, though, to say, look, this is, you guys need to upskill in this side of your business? Because you could be working, like you're saying, 70 hours a week. You can be working 40 and making the same money.
Exactly.
How do you?
I think a lot of it is actually getting them to become aware of what they're doing, and it's the old story about you don't know what you don't know. And that's where Tradies in Business was born.
Get out
there,
find out what you don't know.
But you know what? I've spent a lot of money over the years, hundreds of thousands of dollars on my own sort of, non-university education, which has actually been much more useful than the 3 years I did at uni learning about business and accounting, which didn't teach me shit, by the way.
Because you don't have something to implement it into.
Well, not only that, but it's textbook theory. Imagine sitting down and reading the bloody timber manual as a young chippy.
Doesn't make sense until you start pitching a roof.
Exactly, right? You're not going to go and nail up a frame just by reading a friggin' book. You got to get out there and actually
Make
implement.
mistakes.
I've learned more in the last 20 years by running my own businesses and coaching people in their businesses than I could have through 50 friggin' university degrees, because it's all theory. And you know what? It's all written by a bunch of academics who don't actually, with all due respect, don't live in the same world as trade business owners.
Yeah.
So I used to have a mentor who'd say, you got to think outside the box. And I'm like, how do I think outside the box when I'm in the box?
I live in the box.
Like, I can't just think outside the box. So I think programs like ours, and there's plenty of good ones out there, have an opportunity to show people what they don't know and say, here's some stuff that you might not know. Have a look at all that. Any of those things make you a bit scared or weird? And it's like, holy shit, I didn't know all that stuff. It's like, cool. Well, if you learn about these things, that's actually going to change your life.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a massive problem? And this is what I've seen from my own experience as well. You come out of your trade, and you walk straight into, doing business for yourself, but it's fast paced. It's got to be fast, and you got to keep the work coming in, and you got to keep flogging it and keeping the boys going. And then taking that leap where you want to upskill, or you just stop, you got break that cycle of doing the same old thing every day. It seems to be such a huge problem, that point there where you take the leap of faith and you're like, righto, this is when I'm going to change.
I'm going to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
I'm going to change this.
Because if you stop, the money stops and everything stops, right? And that's the mentality, right?
But so you said something really important, Dan, is, you get your trade and then you go into business for yourself, right? But you didn't. What you did was you found some other people who were going to work as tradies with you. You give them some money. You don't actually have a business yet, right? You're actually a self-employed tradie. So you work for yourself. And that's what my dad did his whole life. He never had a business.
Yeah.
He worked for himself. So it's why it's called self-employed, right? You're working for the biggest lunatic on the planet, and that's you, right? Because they don't give you breaks. They don't pay you annual leave. They don't let you have weekends off. They don't let you sleep at night. They're constantly annoying the shit out of you about all this stuff you've got to take care of. Yeah. And that's your boss, right? So self-employment it can be a nightmare until you actually transition into the business that I guess a lot of people have that epiphany one night at 3 a.m. when they're sick of lying there sweating about the invoices and the quotes and how they're going to pay the wages tomorrow. And they go, that's it, I've got to change something. That's when they actually start to go and find out about business.
Yeah.
And they might have been running their business for 10 years before that or 20 years. I've seen people come to me after 20 years in business, quote unquote, and they're still working the hardest. They're doing the most time on the tools. They're the ones that are going out at 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon to do a job because none of their employees will do it because you can't actually make them go and do that stuff on a weekend, right?
The buck stops with you.
But the business owner goes and does it because but if I say no to that $150 job that might be the end of my entire business, which is just such a crock of
But I think
shit.
it's people like, sitting around telling people how busy they are.
Exactly.
Mate, I'm so busy.
Wear it like a badge. It's like, oh, mate, I work so hard. My dad's done it his whole life.
Yeah, look at that.
He talks about his struggle. He's defined by his struggle.
I wonder it's interesting. I wonder what the end point is for so many operators out there. I wonder what that vision of success finally looks like. At what point do they know that all the hard yards that I've done have paid, for
what are they?
itself?
But I don't think enough people are probably setting goals. Like, do you have enough people that come in and you're like, righto, what's your goal for this year? They're like, to keep the business going. You're like, oh, sweet.
You just nailed it, mate. That is the most common response I get over the years of whether you want to call them goals or intentions or ideas about the future. It's like, so mate, what are you creating here? It's like, what do you mean? Like, well, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to get out of your business? So like, mate, if I can just make another 10 grand this year, I'll be happy. And that's the sort of thinking that is not akin to a business owner. That's the thinking of an employee. It's of a wage earner. Yeah. Because that's where we started out, right? I started in a job. Yeah. I started out looking at my salary and I figured out how I could save a little bit of that or, buy another Commodore and colour code all the bumpers and shit in the garage. Oh, yeah. I had a VL.
A Milo tin on the back.
86 VL Commodore, had the Pursuit wheels. I got the whale tail spoiler kit. I sprayed it up in the garage.
Oh, my God. But
fully sick,
I think it's interesting, like our last podcast with Rob Gray, his mindset compared to your everyday business owner. It's like he's found his niche. He's fully on about the team dynamic, making sure that everyone's across everything. Their communication's up. They're setting goals. Like we do 8 to 10, 1 to $2 million jobs a year, and then that's it. And now we're trying to branch into, low level, like apartment buildings and stuff like that. But he knows exactly the direction he and his brother are taking their business. There's so many tradies out there that are just, better get into her again on Monday and we'll just keep cracking along.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? So population of Australia is only growing rapidly, right? So that's only going to lead to more houses and a bigger, market for construction, building, all that type of stuff.
Huge.
So what can a business, a self-employed tradie out there at the moment, what can they shoot for? Like, what can they achieve, by putting a bit of structure around their business?
Oh, mate, we've got young guys, blokes probably your ages, 20s, mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, personally making 200,000-300,000 a year from their business and working maybe 40 hours a week, 30, 40 hours a week. They got managers in place. We've got a guy, he's got I think his count is 25 staff. And, this bloke's 33 or something, 34 in a trade. He sort of started working with his dad and then went on the tools himself. They had half a dozen fellas. And this bloke's taken over the business 10 years ago. And in 10 years, he's got a $3 million business. He's pulling $300K. He's got investment properties. He's, got time to spend at home with the family. He's every second Friday off. Doesn't ever work weekends. Doesn't answer the phone anymore. He's got teams.
He's got freedom.
Do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what? He's stressed out sometimes. Can you tell me why?
Because he's not doing enough.
Because he's not working. Because he's like, I feel bad.
I can't sit here with my own thoughts. Give me something to do.
I feel bad going home at 12 o'clock on a Friday when I've got staff out there working in the 35-degree heat, crawling under houses. I just can't do it. I'm like, mate, this is what you've worked for. This is what you've worked hard for.
This is why you once crawled under houses.
That's right. But to him, he's just a dumb trade, right?
Yeah.
And so he's got this, and it's an identity thing. It's one of the biggest things I find, even when people come to us and say, righto, that's it, I want to turn this thing into a business. What do we do? And we teach them all that, and they implement some stuff, and it goes really well, and they start making more money, and then they get to the edge of the cliff, right? And it's like they can see that they can jump to the other side where they're like, your previous guest talking about that true business, right? And that means letting go of their identity as a tradie. And I find that's actually one of the big hurdles, especially for the men out there, is coming to terms with the fact that having a trade business is not the same as being a tradie, right? And we all become so attached to our identity as whoever we thought we were.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to change. And that's where I love to work with people is in shifting the way they see themselves, the way they think about themselves, about business, about, being a dad or a wife or a leader. That's where I love to work with people.
It's that mindset.
Awesome.
It's that mindset.
So when someone comes to you, what does it look like? What do those first steps look like when you take the plunge? Righto, I'm gonna go spend a bit of time with Woz and see if we can't get this shit running smoothly. What does that? What do those first stages look like of breaking it right down?
The first thing generally is to look at the boring business stuff, right? Because you got to have some fundamentals in place. I mean, business is business. You guys know that, and your listeners probably know that as well. You got to look at your cash flow and marketing and systems and your recruitment and what you're doing with your staff, culture, and all that sort of stuff. So you've got to have that in place, and that's generally the first step is to make sure that you've got that in place. And depends on the business, depends on the person as to how much work they've got to do to get some of the basics in place. But running alongside that is actually starting to ask the hard questions about, so what are you doing all this for? Like fast forward 10 years, what's happiness look like for you? And like you guys were saying, most of the time it's like, mate, if I'm still alive and I can get out of bed, and there's this sort of, bullshit tongue-in-cheek humour about it. Like, again, it goes back to that working hard thing.
Yeah. And
so it's actually challenging people to think about their life, the way I was in some ways forced to do, where it was like, hang on, I'm 43 years old. I've just lost everything that I know. What is actually important to me in life? And so I've been rebuilding my life based on a new set of values, around time, around family, around money. It's a very different setup, even in my own businesses and how much time I do in those and how I structure all of that based on knowing what my values are and what's important to me.
Yeah.
And that's a big piece for people to actually make change in their business, is to have a look at themselves and go, well, what the hell is important to me? Does this business actually support that?
Yeah.
Is this direction supporting that? Or do I need to do something differently?
How often do you see tradies that are in business that have financially stressed themselves out with the credit card and the debts, but they hate being a tradie and they can't go do anything else? Do you see that? Is that often?
Paint themselves into a corner, yeah. Yep. Because it's just the pathway they go down. And sometimes changing that's really, really hard, but you can always change it.
It's hard to break the mold sometimes, though, isn't it? I think a lot of people find it super hard to bust out of that, image of what life should look like by getting out of school, getting a career, getting married, having kids, and then passing it on to them to do the exact same thing, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
But it's kind of bland.
One of our guys he was a roofer. And for him, rock bottom was falling off a roof and breaking his back in 4 or 5 places. And that was his catalyst. He was okay, luckily, still getting around fine, no wheelchair or anything else. But that was enough of a wake-up call for him to go, I can't keep doing this shit. I got, 2 or 3 kids, whatever he's got, and a wife. And so for him, he actually then learned about business.
Yeah.
He went and actually invested time in his own education about, so what's this cash flow thing everyone talks about? And what about collecting money from people? Yeah. Profit margins.
So true, though, but isn't it funny? You can listen to every podcast in the world, and that's all great.
No, just listen to this one.
You can talk, just listen to this one.
And mine.
Mine was it, sorry.
You can listen to 120 Grit, and you can listen to Tradies in Business till the cows come home. But sometimes it's not until you have that life-changing moment or that, a bit of trauma or something that just like snaps you out of it.
Yeah, but they need that. They need that little push, and exactly.
Yeah, and
it's not, no matter how much you listen to it.
And that's the reality of the whole thing, isn't it? Like it
starts with a choice.
Lead a horse to water.
Absolutely. And I think, something I want to do is lead more horses to water so that they've got the choice.
Yeah.
And they can see that there is an option.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people out there just go, yeah, but this is it. This is as good as it gets. That was my dad, Being a tradie, Warrick, you're going to be physically wrecked and broke, so you're going to university.
Don't do this, was.
Exactly.
What would you say something that every trade business out there can implement now that will instantly help them? Like, what is the first one easy thing to just look at this or start working on this?
I reckon the biggest thing is for them to start looking at their numbers, measuring everything and looking at their numbers. I know that's the boring part that I just said before, the boring stuff, that's not the most important piece. But in terms of starting that realization that, geez, I don't know what I don't know about a whole bunch of stuff here, is instead, and I'm not talking the bank account, right? Looking at the bank balance at the end of every day to see if you can pay the bills tomorrow, that ain't looking at your numbers, right? I'm talking margins on jobs. I'm talking all of your overheads compared to a budget, your cash flow forecast for the next 30 days, how old all of your debtors' payments are, your accounts receivable. It's like, how overdue are all of those, and how much have you actually got sitting out there that people owe you? How much work have you got in the pipeline as far as dollars signed up on quotes? Like actually drilling into all of those numbers, because that's the one thing they do teach you at university and through accounting is the language of business. And the language of business and knowing whether your business is doing well is numbers.
Yeah.
And you can sit there and tell me you're a dumb plumber or a dumb spray painter or whatever, and you're just no good with numbers. And you know what? That's going to be your lot in life.
Yeah.
Until you choose to actually, put that shit to bed and go, you know what? I suck at numbers, so I'm going to go learn about numbers. Right? I bought a mountain bike recently. I suck at mountain biking. So guess what I've been doing? YouTube videos on how to ride a freaking mountain bike.
Yeah.
Right? You just bloody pedal the pedals, was.
No, you're going down a hill. You just bloody hang on for dear life.
Just go faster, was. You'll be fine.
Mate, it's awesome.
And I think there's probably a lot of tradie businesses out there who are, from my experience, as a tradie or self-employed, trying to be a business owner, you are stuck in between suppliers, clients, all these sorts of things.
Hard,
and you're dealing with high numbers, big numbers. Yeah. Materials are expensive. Invoices are expensive as well, and you're all on 30-day accounts and all that sort of stuff, and waiting for payments and all of those kinds of things. And it's not just dependent on you sometimes, is it? You know, you're relying on other people to pay
There's
you.
a lot of zeros flying around.
A lot of moving parts.
And a lot of responsibility and risk these days. I mean, we've had some really good changes across industries with safety, with compliance. You know, we've got some funky stuff going on here in Queensland with particular industry commission, you know, in the spotlight a fair bit. And so there's been some good changes, but that also brings with it a hell of a lot of risk to a trade business because, you know, you're responsible for the personal safety of all of your employees, for the quality of the work that you do. People can come back at you down the track. You know, there's legal implications with all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you want to actually make sure that you're doing all that properly? Like you wouldn't just jump in a friggin' Cessna and go, yeah, I watched a few YouTube videos on how to fly a plane. I reckon I'll have a crack at this. Like that's what a lot of tradies are doing with their businesses. It's like, yeah, you know what? I got a trade. I can build houses. I'm going to go into business.
Yeah.
I got myself an ABN. We're sweet. Let's go.
Hook in.
I heard a story of a kid who had to land a Cessna on the weekend. It was his first flying lesson, and they took off, and the pilot, his instructor pilot, slumped as soon as they took off.
Yeah, he landed it though.
way.
And he got onto
It's a good way to learn,
air
eh?
traffic control, and he's going, "Oh well, me instructor's just slumped here, and I've got control of this thing." So they're talking him through it, and they're saying, "Geez, you're doing a really good job here. Keep it going." And he goes back to the radio control. He says, "Yeah, well, you know, my instructor did say I was the best, you know, student that he's had so far. This is his first lesson. What a goer."
What a unit.
What I was going to say before that Cessna,
Yeah, that was a good story, mate.
Yeah, thanks.
Edit
I've got
that out.
plenty more.
It's a good analogy. I like analogies.
I think what becomes bleedingly obvious is that this stuff that we're talking about here around structuring businesses and, you know, establishing everything needs to be done straight away, immediately. Like when you are just getting into it, if
When
you
you
can
start your
start
business.
right,
Yeah.
if you can start right, set the foundations and establish everything, you know, in a scalable fashion, well,
Build it like you build a house, mate.
well then, start with your
Exactly.
foundations.
You don't.
Analogies.
Yeah.
Pull some string lights.
Come on, mate. You're going to have to catch
Flick
up.
it out.
But that's the thing, right? You do a building apprenticeship. They don't just stick you on a $1 million build in Tenerife as your first project. It's like, there you go, man. Good way to learn. Just jump
hook
straight in.
Here's the plans.
And that's how so many people start their business. Like, you know what? I'm just going to have a chop at it. Now, I'm all for having a go, and I think one of the best ways to learn is to actually have a go. And I think a lot of us have sort of lost a bit of that Aussie, just get in and have a go, mate. And I think that's a really good way to learn. But, geez, you'd want to do it after having watched a few YouTube videos first, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
YouTube. How do I start business?
How to pitch a roof.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably some content out there, and maybe I need to get on YouTube, mate.
Oh, you can learn anything on YouTube these days.
Always be flexing.
Love it.
Well, it's been great, Woz. What would be your first tip to anyone out there that wants to start their own business?
Well, apart from going to tradies in business, I think figure out what you don't know about business first, which is hard. You know, that's like thinking outside the box or outside the square. But go talk to some people in business, and you know, talk to some of the other tradies, the subbies, or you know, someone you know that's been in it for a while, or you know, made a meal of it, whatever. But just go say to them, "What do you wish you knew?"
Yeah.
And you know,
Well, that quote we heard the other day,
Success
success
leaves
leaves clues.
absolutely.
I knew he was going to whip
absolutely.
that.
I love it. I love it.
Success
He had
leaves
that one
clues.
written down there. He's been going to be bust that out for the
There
last
you go.
hour. Yeah.
Chick.
Awesome. Well, mate, been a great chat. If anyone out there listening wants to get on to you to chat a little further, find out about, you know, what you do, although we know what you do now. How can we find you?
Look, easiest way is go to Tradies in Business, so tradiesinbusiness.com.au. We've got a growing group on Facebook, which is wicked. There's some amazing trade business owners in there, some of our clients as well in there sharing their knowledge. So if you go to the groups and find the Tradies in Business group, but we're all over social media as Tradies in Business, so pretty much anywhere you'll see me and my guns just hanging out.
Cool, mate. I shouldn't have mentioned that at the start, should I?
You're not the first person, mate.
Oh, Woz. Love it, mate. Appreciate your time. And,
Thanks, boys.
mate, keep in touch. We'll catch you again soon.
Good
Dan
on you,
Murphy's
Woz.
in Toowoomba.
Yeah.
Will do.
See you in the car park.
Yeah, we'll do a deal in the car park.
Ooh,
Thanks,
sounds
mate.
good.
Thanks, mate.
Righto,
See ya.
boys.
All right.